Hi, welcome to Drinkosaurus, where we take ancient cocktail recipes into the modern era. My name's Matt, I'm your host, and let's get drinking. In this episode, I'm not going to be talking about a specific cocktail, but rather, I'm going to be giving you 5 different ingredients that you can buy for around $100 to make 5 different classic cocktails with. We're going to be talking about each of the different ingredients, and then I'm going to talk about the different recipes that you can follow. In the next episode, I'm going to be making my own cocktail out of these ingredients to give you a total of 5 different recipes to follow. Let's first start with learning about our 5 different spirits. I'm going to give you its name, the price range you can expect, and a rating on how easy it is to find in the store. The most important ingredient to have in your collection are spirits, because those form the base of most of your cocktails. So the spirit that I'm going to recommend purchasing is Rittenhouse 100 or any other bottled and bond rye. So what is a bottled and bond rye? Well, you can tell it's bottled and bond because it says it on the bottle, which sometimes it's hidden. It's like where's Waldo? Where does it say bottled and bond? The term bottled and bond, or bonded for short, comes from the Bottled and Bond Act of 1897. This act was put in place in the United States to counteract whiskey manufacturers that were using cheaper and less than ideal ingredients in their whiskey. So it's a testament to quality, and if something's bottled and bond, it has to follow a few requirements. In order for a whiskey to be bonded, it first must be aged for at least 4 years. This will give it a bit more character than younger whiskeys. The second is it has to be bottled at 100 proof, which is where the 100 from the Rittenhouse 100 comes from. The next is it can't have additives aside from water. So like flavored whiskeys or whiskeys that kind of put in filler ingredients, that's not allowed for it to be bonded. And finally, it has to be distilled in a single location, so you can't have different whiskeys from different distilleries getting blended together, which is pretty popular nowadays. So why is it important that we get a bonded whiskey? Well, if you think about the different specifications for a bonded whiskey, and you think about what the drinking culture was like in the early 2000s and late 90s, where people were looking for more like fruity, sugary cocktails, having a 100 proof whiskey that was distilled in one place wasn't really on people's minds. It wasn't a priority. So you had distilleries making these bonded spirits for a low price because the demand wasn't that high. So you can get a high quality whiskey for a low price. Not for long though, because if you think about the culture around cocktail and spirits today, a lot more people are into whiskey and they care about things about having a high proof whiskey and having it only have water as an added ingredient. So get them quickly because the prices are going up. But this one is, you can find it for $25, sometimes $20, and it's one of the cheapest ingredients on our list. And for a spirit that's really good, that's awesome. So the first ingredient is a bonded rye. I recommend Rittenhouse or Old Overhaul is also pretty good. So let's move on to the next ingredient. Our second ingredient is a sweet vermouth, and I recommend, very strongly recommend, Carpano Antica formula. Vermouth is a fortified wine with added botanicals, and you'll know you're getting a sweet vermouth because there's usually a red cover or cap that will denote it from a dry vermouth, which is usually marked with green. The reason I specifically recommend this vermouth, which is quite a bit more expensive than the cheapest one you can find, is for $10 more, you're getting much better quality vermouth. And you want to make sure that the ingredients that you're all buying are similar in quality, because if you have a really cheap ingredient in a drink, it will really set the standard for that drink. So your drink's really only as good as your cheapest ingredients. When I first started stocking my bar, I bought the cheapest vermouth in the store. And the reason I advise against this is for about a year, I did not want to mix anything that had vermouth in it because it was really cheap and it tasted bad. So I just thought vermouth was terrible and just would make spirits taste bad. It's not until I got this one, which I was like, oh my goodness, vermouth is awesome. And I guess the way to test it for yourself is if you can tolerate drinking it by itself, it's probably a good vermouth. So a higher quality vermouth is good. You can usually get a 375 milliliter version of this for around $15, sometimes up to $20. And if you're going to a liquor store that has variety, it should be pretty easy to find. Just make sure once you open it, refrigerate it, just because of the lower alcohol content, the refrigeration makes it last a little bit longer, which is why I get the smaller size because I don't drink enough to go through the really big size in that time. So sweet vermouth is our second ingredient. Let's move on to the third. Our next ingredient is something that has come up on the show quite a bit, and that is the red liqueur Campari. Campari is a bitter Italian aperitif that probably is one of the more easy to find ingredients on our list. Campari was developed in the 1860s and it was pretty widely available. And if you think about when cocktails really started to become popular in the end of the 1800s, you can understand why Campari shows up in a lot of different cocktail recipes. You'll be happy to have a bottle of Campari on hand because a lot of the classic cocktails will call for Campari. Just like as a warning, if you don't like bitter flavors, Campari on its own might not be super palatable, but it does enhance a cocktail quite a bit. That's ingredient number 3. Let's talk about ingredient number 4. So ingredient number 4 is Averna Amaro, which is a bitter Italian digestif. If you're gonna leave out any ingredient on this list, Averna will probably be it. This is the most specific ingredient that you'll need, but it's something that I recommend because Amari can give you a whole bunch of options for how you can make different cocktails. Campari is a great starter Amaro to have because it has a little bit of everything that you could want from a bitter Italian liqueur. It's a little bit sweet, it's a little bit bitter, and it's a little bit herbal. So really, it kind of does a little bit of everything. It's great. You're really great, Amaro.
You're really great, Amaro.
Averna. Edit that so it's not uncomfortable.
Okay, so edit it so it's more uncomfortable. Got it.
Exactly. Got it. Similar to Campari, if you have a liquor store that has any sort of Amaro or digestifs in there, they probably have Averna. It's pretty easy to get. And once we go into our cocktails, you can make some really tasty stuff with it. So let's go to our final ingredient. The last ingredient is probably the cheapest one to get. It's probably the easiest one to find, but it's definitely one that you don't want to drink on its own. And if you do find yourself drinking this by itself, get some help. It is Angostura Bitters, which are kind of the classic bitters in cocktails. Bitters are like cocktail seasoning, so you're only gonna put a dash or two, and you can get a little bottle of these for about $7. This one's one of the bigger bottles, and only get this if you really foresee yourself making a lot of cocktails, because my smaller one probably lasted me about 5 years or so. Whenever a cocktail calls for bitters and doesn't specify, usually they're talking about Angostura bitters. So these are kind of like the default thing to have in your collection. Now that we've seen the 5 different ingredients, let's talk about different cocktails that you can make from them. With these ingredients, with these 5 ingredients, we can make some of the most classic cocktails. For the 5th one, I'm gonna be making something new that's very different than these other ones. All these 4 are very spirit forward, and for the 5th one, I'm gonna try to make something a little bit more fruity and a little lighter. Starting us off, using just our rye and a little bit of simple syrup and our bitters, you can make an old-fashioned. So the old-fashioned is usually thought of as being the most classic of the cocktails. If we take that 2 ounces of rye and add a 1/2 ounce of our sweet vermouth, also keeping the bitters in there, we get a Manhattan. I like the Manhattan because it has a little bit more complex flavors, especially with that really tasty Carpano Antica vermouth. If we substitute the sweet vermouth with our Averna, we get something called a Black Manhattan, which, if you've been following the series, the first episode we talked about a Black Manhattan in more detail. It tastes very similar to a Manhattan, just the Averna gives a different flavor than the vermouth. So it's a little bit of a variant if you're a Manhattan fan. Fanhattan. If we take our rye, our sweet vermouth, and our Campari and mix them with 1 ounce each, we get a drink called the Boulevardier. And the Boulevardier has even more flavor complexity because it introduces the Campari. So if you like the Manhattan but want something a bit more bitter, you have the Boulevardier. This drink is a variant on the Negroni, which has the same ingredients except the rye is substituted with gin. If you want to buy one more extra secret ingredient, you can make a drink called the Left Hand, which is similar ingredients to the Boulevardier, has a little bit of different ratios, which you'll see here, and also incorporates mole bitters, which give a more cinnamon sort of touch. So if you have mole bitters lying around, this is a wonderful variant you can make. But we're not going to count it in our 5 because that would be mean. Be like, here's 5 ingredients. Oh, and just have mole bitters. Yeah, you have those at home. What was my last one? Oh wait, that was 4. Hopefully a few of those classic cocktails sound familiar, and if you're looking to start your own little bar at home, these will probably be common requests. For our 5th cocktail, you'll have to go to our next episode where I make something completely new, hopefully, at least as far as I know, and it'll be less spirit forward than the 4 cocktails listed, and it'll be more citrusy and fruity. Drinkosaurus is a production of Little Giant Monsters. If you'd like to see other things we're working on, check us out on different social media platforms. If you'd like to support us, please consider supporting us on Patreon. If you have any ideas for future videos or any comments, let me know in the comment sections. That's where the comments go. And as always, and it's funny because I'm going to say something that I never say, so it's not as always, so I'm lying to you. As per this moment, keep drinking and buy responsibly. Buy responsibly. I don't know. I'm trying to make it cute. See you in the next episode. Bye.